Um, but thank you all for being here. My name is Matt. I am the Community Impact and Evaluation Specialist here with North Sound ACH. And today's an exciting day. We're starting the kickoff for our regional North Sound Wellbeing Survey. Um, so appreciation for everyone here who is interested in hearing about what that's going to look like and potentially jumping in to help us with this effort. Um, this is the first time we've tried something like this, and it's a long time coming. So yeah, just gratitude to everyone. Um, if you want to just go ahead real quick, throw your names and where you're working and anything else you think might be interesting in the chat. We can all kind of see who all is here. And then Stacy, if you want to jump to the next page, I think we've got our overview of the agenda. Yeah, perfect. Um, so this is just kind of a sneak peek of what we're going to be talking about for this next hour or so. Um, we'll start off with a little bit of a basic overview. What is measuring well-being? Why do we do it? Why is that something that we're looking at doing here in the North Sound region? And then we'll share a bit about what the Measuring Wellbeing Community of Practice, which is a group made up of collaborative action network partners. Um, we'll share what we've been working on for the last year and what we're kind of ready to bring to the region there in this effort. Um, and we'll talk a bit about next steps and kind of what we're hoping to accomplish. And if we could hop to the next one, Stacy, and I think if I remember right, you're gonna take us away from here.
Thanks, Matt. I think Cynthia is going to jump in with us here. Get us advanced just to do a little bit of a wide aperture, just sort of reminding us sort of our collective work as a network.
Yeah, exactly. Good afternoon, everyone. I know that I'm preaching to the choir, and so we just want to remind us why we're here and the work that we're doing, the important work that we're doing. So we know that advancing equity, well-being, and a sense of belonging are our future elements of the regional work, using the framework of targeted universalism to shape and inform planning, actions, decision making, and investment. We also we also know that all community members deserve um, to experience mental, social, physical, financial, spiritual well-being, and the inherited legacies of systemic racism have perpetuated trauma and exclusion, particularly those in the indigenous populations and communities. So together we can create new legacies and the conditions that ensure a sense of belonging for all people, and I want to say all underlined, who call this region home. We're accountable to each other and to the well-being of future generations. So I am excited that we are launching this. It's important that we hear from everyone. And I was just talking to a friend of mine on the phone as I was coming back from a meeting, and she was like, "How do you measure well-being? What does that mean?" And I told, I was just sharing the importance of making sure that we can do all we can to reach folks and to really ensure that we hear from the voices of the people and not just make the assumptions, because so many years people have made assumptions about what that means, or we don't even look at what that well-being matters. But so I'm really excited. Congratulations, Matt, and the communities of practice for doing this work. And so that's why we're here, and let's move on forward.
Thanks, Cynthia. Just appreciate sort of the double click really on the commitments that all who are in this room with us today have already made and are, working to advance each and every day. And as we think about that sort of North Star of our, collective ability to thrive together, with that commitment that all people and places are thriving, no exceptions. One of the things that we do know is that there is measurement opportunity for that so that we can see what our starting points are and to be able to track our progress toward that aspiration over time. I'm going to take a few minutes to unpack just a little bit of the background. Some of this, some of you are familiar with as you've been journeying with us and to help shape this work through the communities of practice. Some of you have also heard, some of the work over the course of, convenings over the last couple of years as we're really sort of thinking about sort of what's our role, what's the right time, and what will this look like in the North Sound region as we've learned from others around the country. And to take that opportunity now just to do a little bit of level set and bring others who will be starting this walk with us here in the new year. So again, grateful for all who have been able to join today. But just stepping back just a bit, or perhaps it's a step forward to take a closer look at really, what is measuring well-being and, what does that consist of? What makes up our sense of well-being? And we think about it and in looking at the national work sort of in two pieces, which have many pieces within. But as we think about sort of our individual experience, our individual perceptions, how we feel about our lives now, how we think about what that will look like in the future. And our well-being and our experience of well-being is shaped very much by the places where we live, work, play, pray. So as we think about those vital conditions of humane housing and meaningful work and wealth, and the well-being survey itself is going to be taking a look at and focusing on that individual experience, really being able to hear community voice and that opportunity to co-create and shape from what is learned together in that work. As we think together a little bit about some of the measures that will make up the assessment of well-being, one of the nationally sort of known and used measures is that of Cantrell's ladder, which is really two separate questions. And I alluded to it a moment ago, but it's in helping folks answer the question, as they think about their lives, at this moment. How do you feel? And thinking about sort of a ladder as the first rung or bottom rung being a 0, sort of my worst possible life, and that top rung or a rating of 10 being my best possible life. How do I feel and where am I now? And what am I thinking about how I might feel 5 years from now? And then this particular measure is an index measure, meaning that the scores from both of those will be important and brought together to be able to actually assess who is thriving, struggling, and suffering. For example, those with a ranking of 4 or below on both questions will be reflected in the suffering category. As we think about, are we the first to do this? Where else is this happening? What does this look like? Cantrell's ladder questions have been around for quite some time, and the Gallup in particular has done a national well-being survey. They started this back in 2008. And where they were measuring or getting voice and responses from about 5,000 US adults, that's 18 and older in this particular evaluation or assessment, and they were doing so each quarter. They were using Cantrell's questions, but just as you all will see that you all will be doing as well, they were examining a number of other areas, looking at and asking about your sense of purpose, social connection and isolation, financial, physical, and what's present or absent in community that's supporting or inhibiting well-being. One of the things that we know about these, self assessments, or what they call self-anchoring, sort of our perspective of our health, is they are highly predictive of what will occur in the future, our health and those outcomes. And you can see in a little bit more detail when we talk about thriving, struggling, and suffering, the definitions therein. Those thriving are experiencing well-being that is strong, that is consistent, that is progressing. And those who are suffering have well-being that's at high risk. In our quest to thrive together, we want to understand, what are those starting points? And as you all have committed to as a region, how are people situated differently in those, in those starting places? One of the nice things about the Cantrell Ladder questions is it is a very responsive measure, and you can see from this quick graphic, not to pull the graphic itself apart, but you can see over the course of time, the dip in 2008, when we had the housing and financial crisis. You can see again over in August of 2020, as we look at some of the disaggregated information, those who are identify as Asian had lower levels of well-being. And we know what some of the impact was during COVID at that time on our Asian neighbors and residents. But one of the things in particular about the well-being measure is not having it be another set of quantitative data that, is narrow in its focus, that is backwards looking, or more of a reflection. But to really think about the well-being data and how we do this work together to measure our regional well-being as being, catalytic, as having the opportunity to be transformative. And we'll talk in a moment about a couple of other communities who've been doing some of this work that we've had the opportunity to walk with and to be learning from. But as we think about measuring well-being, really being far more integrated into the more community engagement work that many in this room have been really committed to and doing in more, authentic and bridging ways. That this is an opportunity for deeper conversation, for building relationship, for being able to bring together both the quantitative, the numbers that we will be able to look at, with the stories and the context and the texture for, what is going on behind those numbers. These surveys and conversations over time also have the opportunity to really be reflective of, multiple cultural lenses. And it will be ever so important that as the information and the data and responses come in, that there'll be processes for doing shared meaning making in this work in a host of ways. I'll do a couple of quick touch bases on a couple of communities. And some of you have heard the story of Imagine Fox Cities, perhaps, but just to revisit quickly, this is one of the first communities that was learning from the larger Gallup data and really wanted to see, what their story of well-being was. And they were bringing with them a bigger question around, what does it look like if we as a community, and what might we be doing different? What opportunities might we be creating if, in fact, we were asking, the question about, what will our grandchildren's children need, rather than, being entirely, stuck in the more transactional, what's the next stakeholder meeting and what are our grant cycles in this work. This is a series of counties, again, sort of a group who was doing regional work. They're located about an hour outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And they're a series of primarily suburban and rural communities. They took a two-prong approach in parallel with one another, and you all will be doing some layering and sort of stacking of this process, as Matt will share a bit more about in a few minutes. but they use the well-being survey in conjunction with a series of community dialogues. So over the course of several months, they collected close to, or I think maybe just over 3,000 community surveys, again, with a very targeted universalism approach. We want to have broad spread surveys available in libraries and other, municipal settings and newsletters, et cetera. And we want to do some real intentional bridging to be able to reach out to, men and our second shift workers and our young people, as well as a number of our cultural communities. They have a substantive Hmong population, as well as a growing LGBTQ population in this region. They had also a total, so the 30, I think just over 3,000 surveys, and they ended up hosting just over 80 community conversations, again, and doing sense making and sharing kind of the stories behind the data. As they looked at this information together, and you may have seen on the previous slide, the pictures in the community library, they actually used a public space in addition to a series of meetings and otherwise, where they took those themes and, really moved those pieces around to say, what are we learning in this? And they landed on originally 6, which they've further refined into 4 areas. For areas of work for them, and that commitment to all kids get off to a strong start, an economy that works for everyone, shared spaces and a rich cultural environment that connect us, and being a place where all belong. Because in each of these instances, there was a strong economy for some, but not all. And some had lived there for generations and felt, a strong sense of belonging. And many who were new or people of color who had come into the community again were not feeling that same sense. Their survey results showed that nearly half of folks were either struggling or suffering. And as folks, took in that data and again, the other stories and pieces behind that, it really brought sort of new energy to the work that they were in conversation and co-creating to do together to address those 4 pillar areas. This is a region actually that had sort of the name Happy Valley, and to find that nearly half of their folks were struggling or suffering was definitely a conversation starter and an eye-opener. You can also see that they, again, with their intentional outreach and inclusivity of the survey, were able to disaggregate, much like Gallup did, to be able to look at older adults in this community were doing particularly well with a sense of belonging, while community members who are Black or African American, their youth, LGBTQ communities were not feeling the same. And as a community, this region decided to start with belonging and civic muscle. We know it's also not only a vital condition, but the animator of each of the other vital conditions in this work. They did things such as remade their theater and music so that there were more cultural pieces. They invested in art and community placemaking as opportunities to come together. They also really leaned in and had a new series of dialogues. One series was about race, one was about poverty. There was a series around policing. Those things influenced the elected officials, policies and investments. It shaped hiring of police, the next police captain. So those community dialogues really were helpful in their community transformation. In your all's backyard there in the state of Washington and another ACH community, some of you may know or have colleagues up around the Wenatchee area, Douglas, Chelan, Grant counties. So the North Central team recently also took on the well-being survey as a part of their early work. And in fact, Cynthia and Liz were able to join them just a few months ago, and that this is a younger network. You all are farther along in your relationship and network building. And so Liz and Cynthia came to share some of, your all's experiences, some of what's working, places where perhaps you all, have stumbled and grown and learned together. And as each community and network often starts from a different place, the Thriving Together North Central group, while they've been convening and working on shared learning and building a shared vision, they also wanted to begin with measuring and tracking well-being. As they finished their first round, they collected, just as you see, 2,700 or just over surveys. They did so in more than 50 locations with 25 plus participating partners. So again, what a critical role you all will play in this work. Not to go through the specific numbers because we can share these slides for those who may be interested, and we can also point to sort of richer, more robust reports and other ways that the North Central team have shared out. But again, to be able to see the importance of, across geographies, that we're trying to collect surveys and numbers that are representative of our populations in those areas. Also for North Central, the work that they did to really reach out to their Spanish-speaking community, a much more rural community, a lot of field and farm workers, and they had a number of strategies in which they sat down in conversation and in support of filling out paper well-being surveys in addition to QR codes, and again, building relationship for learning and hearing and listening at this moment, and for building and creating together in the future. Their results, again, not really in point to compare to Imagine Fox Cities, and we know the responsiveness of this, and so over time, but there is a similar pattern in that we've got nearly 50% again of community members who are struggling or suffering. They also were intentional and super inclusive in their outreach so that they were able to look more closely at how different folks in the community were differently situated. We can see here just again a couple of differences. While we saw in Imagine Fox Cities or Wisconsin area region, the older adults had a stronger sense of belonging. And this group, our older adults at this particular time or whatever, are struggling more. One of the other pieces that North Central also picked up is people experiencing loneliness. And we've heard from the Surgeon General and many others, and in our own experience, really realizing the impact of loneliness on thriving and many other health outcomes. So something that you will all be looking at as well. And I think the last note here for North Central, also in their feedback, because there are a couple of open-ended questions as there are in your survey, and that opportunity to really map what they learned to the vital conditions as they think about where to begin. And really compelling to see that 50% of what folks said contributes to their well-being were, mapped back to belonging and civic muscle, just how core and central this is for them. Basic needs for health and safety came up, and meaningful work and wealth, in addition to, a number of the others. But as we think about what comes next and how we create together. A couple of quick notes as, again, that community voice is brought to this work: access to jobs that pay a family wage, access to trails, places like public libraries that provide free service, access to internet, and a variety of other pieces. And Cynthia, I know you had the opportunity to join at the Wellbeing Summit and just, shared really so generously with North Central about the work of North Sound. And I'm wondering if you've got any sort of notes or reflections coming out of the summit as they shared back their findings and began to dig into the shared sense making and what comes next for them.
Well, I have to say it was an honor for us to be invited to their inaugural summit. They had no idea how many people were going to show up, and the room was full. There was not one seat open. And that for me was really encouraging. After after they presented the findings of their well-being survey. I think the energy in the room was really high, um, because everyone was really aligned more than they thought and on the same page, ready to dig in and do the work. They got to see exactly what was happening in their community, the highs and those deficits that they'll be able to work together. People didn't want to leave. At the end of the day, they stayed and they networked and they collaborated, and I'm excited to see what comes out of that. But I just I know they are on the right track and their communities coming together even closer. So I look forward to connecting with them again.
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. And it really has been such a powerful sharing in both ways. I know Meg and Natalie is a part of your all's team who are helping to support some of the communication tools that Matt will be sharing in just a moment. We're able to talk to the team there at North Central, and what did they learn, what worked, what didn't, what was useful to community partners. And so on that, let's move down into the practical of, what does that survey look like for you all? What's available to help support this work, and how can you get involved? So Matt, handing it off to you.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Cynthia. If we're able to hop on to the next slide, I think we'll have, yeah, just a quick overview of, what kind of the guiding factors for the Measuring Wellbeing community of practice has been, I guess, over the last year or so. Um, so this was, when this kind of came together, I think it was in the January 2024 convening, um, where this group of us really got together and kind of started this work. I was maybe 6 months on the job, did not know much about measuring well-being at that point, so it was a learning journey for everybody. Um, but as we started to meet and kind of plan for the future, these five pieces kind of fell into place. So the community of practice came together and we kind of grew and we shrunk over the last year. But through that time, we've been able to develop the survey, with a group of us from all around the region. We did a smaller pilot a couple months ago, which still continues to bring in a couple surveys a week that'll kind of help add to that total at the end. Um, Stacy and Monty have been um, super helpful in helping to add to the North Sound ACH resource library, which will, when we send out a follow-up to this, we'll have links to that for some kind of additional learning stuff about measuring well-being. Um, and yeah, have gotten us to this point where we're able to officially kick off the survey in the region and kind of move towards what's next. If we want to hop to the next thing, perfect. So yeah, our goal for this survey, as kind of the resident ACH survey guy, I something I'm always aware of is a lot of surveys or when we're trying to gather information from community, it can be um, it can be easy to fall into that trap of having it be extractive, where we're just trying to skim data from people and they never maybe see the next step. We answered this survey, we never heard about it again. What was the point, sort of thing. So from the beginning, that's always been something that we've been really aware of and intentional in planning to avoid. And really, the goal for this is to understand with that Cantrell's ladder scale and some other questions who's thriving, struggling, and suffering, as Stacy talked about with us earlier. Um, we'll be centering community voice throughout all of this, I think, in the collection. And, once we've finished collection and have moved on to more and interpreting and sharing results and kind of using those in a catalytic way to, kind of think about what comes next and help guide our work. Community voice will be a big part of that. Through similar things, community dialogues, discussions about the results, not just having some folks behind a screen interpret the data and tell us what it means, but actually, sharing that back out with the community and have them, tell us what's next. Um, yeah, just through that shared meaning making there. If we want to jump to the next screen here, this might be a little small for some of you, but this is the survey altogether. Um, another thing that's been intentional as we put the survey together, is that we wanted to make sure it was lightweight and easy to complete, and not a big behemoth that's going to take a lot of folks' time. Um, you can see up there we've got the less than 6 minutes. Um, I would argue, I realized actually as we were gearing up for this, through this whole time we've put together the survey, I've never actually done it. So I hopped on and did it before we did, hopped on this call here. It took me maybe, 2 or 3 minutes total. So it is very lightweight. And because we were planning on, leaning on our partners throughout the region to help us with this effort. Um, I come from a direct service background, working in a resource center. I know time is short and extra things can kind of pile up and create a lot of extra work. So having a survey that's quick, easy to do was kind of pretty important throughout the whole process. So this survey is 15 questions with kind of an added demographic question at the end. But of those 15 questions, 11 of them are multiple choice, four are open-ended. So really trying to lean towards the quick and easy piece there. And I will say too, as far as like actual required questions, if we're talking about the digital version to move through the survey, it's really just those first four, kind of where we hit the Cantrell's ladder questions. So at a minimum, we can try to capture that thriving, struggling, suffering scale. And then anything else is just gravy. Um, but this is what the survey looks like, in its printed form. I think I saw a comment from Missy in the chat there, about kind of the paper surveys. And that was another thing throughout all this is making sure that the survey is accessible not just to the tech savvy or those who um, kind of have the time or those who are, maybe regularly surveyed. We're interested in hearing from everybody in the community, and like Cynthia said, we'll underline the all there because we really do mean everybody. And if we can um, hop to the next screen here. Yeah, and then maybe one more forward. Perfect. So just want to talk about kind of the tools we have, and some of the things that'll go alongside the survey. So on our resource library page, which again this will kind of go out after the call, we have links to the survey just digitally. We have places where you can download a paper version, both English and Spanish. Um, and then, some frequently asked questions and kind of an overview that basically gives you like a pared down version of this call today, about the how and the why, we measure well-being and some of the things we're trying to achieve through this. Um, let's see. And Laura, I see your question in the chat here, um, which I'm happy to just kind of jump into that too, and we can bounce around a little bit. So are there plans to coordinate with local health jurisdictions, community health assessments? I realize the goals and tools are different, but it also seems like they could align and complement. Um, I will say yes, ultimately, I think that is a goal of mine. Um, this go around, at least through the pilot survey, we didn't have any folks from health departments or other jurisdictions. We did have someone from we had a couple hospital districts who were involved in crafting the survey and running the pilot. But as far as kind of governmental structures, we didn't have anybody in that pilot phase. Um, but I think long term, once we've kind of proved the concept in our region here a little bit, um, my thinking is that's going to be kind of a natural alignment that will start to happen. Because I think a lot of the county health departments and their community health assessments. Um, they do super important work, and it's generally kind of as Stacy mentioned with some of the visuals she had there. The well-being survey is super responsive and for a lot of events you can pinpoint kind of some shifts and some swings a little more regularly than um, kind of 5-year community health assessments that are focusing on some different things. But yeah, I think as the North Sound ACH, where we're using this framework of the 7 vital conditions, we're asking some things that might not be captured in a traditional health assessment. Um, and the goal is not to replace, but to be complementary and kind of align with what some of the other things are doing. So hopefully that was an answer to your question there, Laura, and a little bit more of an explainer about some of the goals for this as well. Stacy, if you want to hop on to the next slide here, QR codes. Um, Love-hate relationship with QR codes. Something we were able to do with the pilot, which we're going to continue in the full regional survey if it's of interest to any of the partners who are taking this on. Um, is we have a full like a general QR code that leads to the survey. And from there you can choose the English and the Spanish version. So it's all run through one singular QR code. But something we were able to offer, if it was of interest to some of the partners in the community of practice, was instead of that general code, was an organizational QR code for the survey. Um, and with that, once we had enough surveys in for anonymity, we were able to set up data portals where those organizations could look at the results coming in and see some basic visuals in real time to see kind of what their client base, their staff, whoever they were surveying might be reporting. And on the back end, these are all just different streams that go into this big river of the survey results. But for folks who also have an interest in seeing what's going on, kind of in their more hyper-local community or within their organization, the thinking was this could be a little bit of an extra carrot to kind of help get some surveys out to folks and get a little more insight in real time without having to wait for kind of file analysis and longer term discussion and meaning making to come out of that. So if that perks any of your ears up and you're interested in that, let me know because that's pretty easy for me to set up for you. And we can implement that in some of the other tools that we'll talk about here in a little bit too, that we have to kind of help get the word out about the survey. Let's see. Yeah, and then our lessons to date. So um, with the pilot survey, we had a few things demographically that we started to notice and just some things. Some of these are maybe expected, some of these were less so. But just some things that we are looking at as surveys kind of go out and just something to keep in mind if you're helping to collect surveys yourself. So we noticed that women were more likely than men to answer the survey, I think at a rate of about 70%. So, as we're talking about specific outreach, that was one thing to keep aware of. And again, we want to make sure we are getting voice from all the geographies in our region. Snohomish County makes up a little over 60% of the region's population, but we had, pretty low response rate in Snohomish County. Part of that is just the makeup of the community of practice. We were pretty heavily Whatcom and Skagit County groups there, but Snohomish County, Island County, the San Juans in particular too, with their geographic isolation. if you're working in those places, I would definitely encourage you to think about how you might be able to help contribute to this work here. Um, and then next generation, so youth voice was pretty low in our pilot as well. Um, we noticed folks 65 or older were a little higher represented compared to kind of regional demographics, and folks 18 to 24 were pretty underrepresented. Um, and then similar for folks in the LGBTQ community. And we did okay looking at regional demographics in the pilot with BIPOC, indigenous communities. But again, I think, if we're thinking about ensuring that we're hearing from all voices, we want to make sure that we're continuing um, to provide opportunity for their voices to be heard, so we can start to make some meaningful comparisons and give us a real clear view with that targeted universalism approach about where we might need to move moving forward. Um, so big thank you to all of the community practice folks who helped with that pilot survey, and helped us learn some of these lessons. We'll talk a little bit here too about communication tools. So these are two things you can find right now in the resource library. Again, it's a pretty pared down version of what we talked about today. What is well-being? Why do we measure it? And then what specifically is this effort in the North Sound region all about? Talking about what we're going to do, what are the next steps. But what I'm super excited about is on the next slide, which is something that our communications team here at the ACH have been working on, which is a bit of like a communications toolkit um, for the well-being survey. So this includes posters, postcards, stuff you can throw on social media, um, all sorts of I'm not big into social, all sorts of shareables that you can kind of share out. Um, and whatever is going to work for you and your organizations. If your organization has a big social media preference or a big social media presence, take advantage of this stuff. If you just got a lobby or a newsletter, you can throw some FAQs and a QR code into. That'd be great too. Um, whatever is kind of the best fit for your organization. Um, but all this stuff will go up on the resource library, will be sent out to you as a follow-up as well. So this will be, again, just the goal is really to kind of make things as lightweight as possible and make it as easy as we can for our partners who are already doing a lot of work to help us with this effort here. And let's see. And again, with the resource library, if you're interested in digging in a little more about measuring well-being, the hows and the whys, and some places that have done this work before. If you scroll down to the bottom of the resource library, the measuring well-being page, you'll see that there's some kind of further reading, Gallup and some other places that have done this well-being work in the past. I don't know if this is on the resource library page, but if you take a look at Thriving Together North Central's website, so our sister ACH to the east, they recently released a web-based version of their report from their well-being survey, um, which is a pretty cool read. So that might be something to look at as well if that piques your interest. If we could hop on to the next slide. Perfect. So, um, as we move forward with survey collection, um, I'm here to be a resource to any partner or anybody who's doing this work. Um, that'll include language translation. We have materials in English and Spanish currently. But if you are, working with a population of folks who has a different language need, let me know and I can get the digital and physical versions of the survey translated into that language pretty quick, and get that shared out. Um, if printing large amounts of surveys is going to be an issue for you, it's because of budget or even just printer access, let me know and I can get that arranged. Um, Same when it comes to data entry. If you're kind of in Missy's boat and physical, paper copies of the survey are going to be something that's a little easier for you or whoever you're helping do the survey to do. Um, I'm happy to work out a way to either have those scanned and emailed to me. I'm happy to run around and, drive and just pick them up from you as well. Whatever we can do to make it as lightweight and easy as possible, and kind of handle that data entry on my own on the back end. Um, if you're interested in helping to do the survey collection, but you're not quite sure where to start, just let me know. I'd be happy to, again, hop on a Zoom call or come down to wherever you're at and chat with yourself or your team and figure out what's going to work the best to get this this survey out to folks. And again, promotional materials. So the communications toolkit will go out to everybody. We'll have it, kind of in an accessible folder in the resource library, so it's available to anyone who might need it. And we've got three dots because who knows what else folks might need. So again, I'm here to assist you in whatever way you might need. Just send me an email or give me a call and we can kind of go from there. Excuse me. Too much talking, more talking than I'm used to. I think one of our last slides here is this work plan timeline. And again, just to kind of show the history of, how we got to this point where we started, kind of beginning of 2024, where this community practice was put together and we started developing the pilot. Um, you're finding us now in the beginning of 2025, where we're starting this regional survey collection. And then we're anticipating at least having the initial findings out by April of this year. And from there, I think we're moving on to um, kind of we call it phase two. We don't have quite a name for it yet, but we'll get into that meaning making a little bit. Um, through community dialogues, through learning sessions, future partner convenings, um, finding ways that we can use the findings from this survey and what the community is telling us to kind of inform future work, um, and help serve our communities as best we can. So just a sneak peek there of what's happened and then a little bit of what's to come. And then I see we have a couple questions in the chat. We do have a Q&A session at the end too, so I might, Keiko, I see your question there. I might hold off on those till we get to the Q&A at the very end. Yeah, and we do have ongoing community practice meetings as well. They're the first Monday of every month. I think they're on the North Sound events calendar. If for some reason they're not, they will be soon. But these are, kind of open to everybody who wants to jump in, especially as we move into this regional survey collection. You'll be able to chat with us with some folks who have done the pilot and if you're bumping into some roadblocks or want some advice or just want to chat with some other folks who are doing this work, that's what those meetings are set up for. So, um, this is the group that helped put this survey together, and as we move into survey collection and then eventual meaning making and sharing back with the community, we'll continue to lean on that group for support. Um, Okay. And then we're here at our group Q&A. Um, so just a quick guiding question. What do you see as opportunities to contribute? I know we got a couple folks from the community of practice on the call as well. If anyone else wants to throw their 2 cents in there, kind of open floor for that. Um, and then Keiko and some other folks, if you want to um, ask your questions audibly, go for that, or I can just read off the transcript here as well. We can just kind of freeform it a little bit. Yeah, go for it, Keiko.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, and I might have just missed this, in your presentation, but I was just curious about disaggregation of data and, just kind of struck by like, I was a little surprised that folks are mainly feeling like they're doing well, right? And then I think, oh, that can't be true for, certain populations. And of course, looking at what happened during COVID for Asian populations. Um, and then also thinking about how events do impact, like current events impact, certain populations. So, for instance, the trans community who are facing a really uncertain future and might have, there might have been a different outcome, but we are where we are. And so I'm just kind of curious about that, about like, it does seem like those measures are very um, just might be very influenced by what is currently happening, that, not necessarily that everything can be predicted, but that might have a really strong impact for some communities that might not have been anticipated when the survey rolled out.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a totally reasonable thing to ask, and it's something I've been thinking about as well. Um, maybe two answers to that question, maybe partial answers because we could talk about it all day. But on the one hand, I haven't thought too much about this yet, but I think we've got the numbers from the pilot. Um, if we're talking about current events, probably the election is going to be the biggest one. I think that's causing the most uncertainty for a lot of folks. But this pilot kind of wrapped up pre-election, and the survey collection is happening post-election. So I think we've got the numbers from the pilot to actually do some meaningful, losing the word, but some meaningful comparisons there. And again, I think this is the first time we're doing this survey, and trying to I think of this as kind of establishing a baseline, or taking a first pass at it. And we haven't talked about a timeline for future surveys, but I would imagine, within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll probably be doing this again and starting to see if we can kind of establish some trends and see what's happening, which I think we'll get to some of that responsiveness, right? I mean, we none of us can predict world events, but we're playing with the hands we have currently. So it's something that we'll continue to look at over time. But yeah, I think I am super interested to see comparisons between the pilot and current, and what all that starts to look like. Stacey, I think you might have been about to say something too.
Yeah, apologies that I bumped into you there. Yeah, Keiko, I think it's a wonderful question. And I think just the opportunity to double click because it is such a highly responsive um, survey, or those Cantrell ladder questions. And we can see with the national data that, dip in 2008, we can see some of the impacts of COVID and some of the ways that data is disaggregated. And I think, that's a good part of why it will be so important, as you all do your outreach and think about engagement. And that's why the question to sort of when will the survey close out, Matt and team are targeting kind of the first week of March, but also have a little bit of fluidity and flexibility on sort of adding a week or two. So whether it was Imagine Fox Cities or whether it was North Central, each of those groups, as Matt has been doing, was watching the data and saying who is still missing and, what additional, connections do we need to make? What other intermediaries do we need to reach out to, so that, folks are interacting with trusted people, around completing the survey. And if we were to look at the sort of full, spread of Imagine Fox Cities results, for example, LGBTQ and trans, came up among the more struggling and suffering, groups, and then combine that as you're naming with, just the different contexts that, different periods of time or whatever are sharing or giving us to work with. But so I think just going to be so important to be able to connect with those voices so that you all have that nuanced story to start with and to continue to allow sort of the community conversations and dialogue and sense making to add that texture too.
Matt, sorry, I have a follow-up question. Thank you, Stacy.
Oh,
And then
yeah,
I
go for
will
it.
shut my mouth. But it really has to do with, so if you look at like the trans community, you look at undocumented immigrants as a community, that like those are the communities we probably need the most to participate in this. And these are the communities that are for whom answering a survey or participating is really fraught with, a certain level of danger for them. And so are we also like what is our approach, or are we developing tools to reach out to communities who already feel very vulnerable and targeted and don't necessarily want their information known or anything like that? I'm just curious about that. I was thinking about something Lyndon said a while back about how trans individuals do not wish to be on the radar necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think that's something that we're all very sensitive to. And we've had some conversation about um, one thing that, as Stacy said, kind of leaning on trusted partners a little bit to do some of this work, uh, if I was going around knocking door to door with a survey, I doubt I would get a lot of responses from folks who don't want to do it. But that's the beauty of this collaborative action network is we have a lot of folks who are, trusted in their communities and can operate a little bit as that bridge, to kind of help make that a little more of a comfortable process. Um, and that's something that as we have surveys coming in, and that demographic section is pretty clearly marked as optional. So even if folks who don't want to identify as LGBTQ, race, ethnicity, gender, whatever, in that demographic section, even where they live, they don't have to, and they can still at least kind of get their well-being and some of the things that are going on with them across and in the conversation there. Um, but yeah, it's the demographics are something I'll be monitoring as we go. And if it's looking like we don't have the representation that we might need to anonymously do some of that disaggregation, we'll start to do a little more targeted outreach to community partners and places where we might be able to build those connections to make sure those voices are heard and um, are equally accounted for among all the other voices. Yeah. So it'll be a work in progress. Yep.
And I think where the numbers aren't there, Keiko and others, then the data would be suppressed because under no circumstances do we want to be exposing people.
Yeah. Daniela, I'll go to you in just a moment. I just saw a quick thing in here from Missy that I don't want to miss. But yeah, it takes about 6 minutes to do the survey. Less than that if you're not doing the demographics, and even less if you're just doing like those four kind of required questions on the digital one. Yeah, but it's a pretty quick survey. trying to be respectful of everybody's time with that and still kind of get some of that information we're needing. Daniela, go for it.
Hello. My question is coming from a community health worker background and having the experience of working with different communities, rural communities, Spanish-speaking houseless communities. The last 5 years, I have noticed that it's a lot of like skepticism in these communities. So they think the surveys are a waste of time.
20 minutes.
So my question is any like incentive or like ways that we can target those communities that are the communities that need the help the most to obtain that data from the survey?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And again, something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about. Like I mentioned, I come from a direct service background as well. Working in coordinated entry and kind of housing intake and resource navigation. So I'm used to that skepticism, and I've definitely seen that firsthand. Folks who are maybe not super trustworthy of I'll say the system. Um, but yeah, I part of my answer I think is maybe the same as Keiko. Um, where we'll be leaning a bit on community partners and folks who have kind of, on both sides of the coin kind of have done that work to be trusted in those communities, and can also kind of communicate the importance um, that their voices are included in this work here. Um, and I'm not gonna, be the one to say I have all the answers for that. I think, we'll be leaning a lot on the expertise of those folks, and I'm not gonna say there's a right way or a wrong way to do that survey with folks, because I know that firsthand too from some of the work I've done in the past. Um, doing a going through a packet of paper with somebody at a desk who's got a lot of trauma about even being in like an office environment. Um, there's a lot of different ways to kind of have that done. So um, we'll count on the experts and the folks who kind of know their communities the best, and where we need to make adjustments or do some more specific outreach and maybe bring in some new folks, we'll do that as well. Um, so again, hopefully answering your question there, Daniela. And if you got thoughts, I'd love to hear them too. Laura, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for all your great work on developing this so thoughtfully. I had a question about we're talking about data suppression if the numbers are low, and wondering if there are already sort of set thresholds that you would be wanting or needing to reach in order to release the data. I mean, kind of standard small numbers, data handling is usually 10, but I wondered if you had different thresholds for that. And then I have another question too.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty quick one. I'll be kind of leaning just on the standard there, same as like Department of Health or Healthcare Authority would with that 10. Um, unless there's something super identifiable in there that we just can't get around. So
Yeah,
uh,
okay,
I'll say 10 with an asterisk. But
that's
yeah,
good. Yeah.
next question.
The other question was related to the geography question on this survey. I'm curious what the rationale is for asking people to identify town or city versus zip code. And the reason I'm thinking about that is that so much of the North Sound is rural and unincorporated areas. And so the affiliation with a town can get kind of blurry like Lummi Island. Is that Bellingham's not a town or a city? Is it Bellingham? They're part of the Ferndale School District, but they do have their own zip code. So I'm just curious about that choice in the survey itself.
Yeah. I I think I remember when we were getting the survey kind of put together. I think that's something that we went back and forth about in the group as well. Um, and I think the rationale for it was I think it was, again, this was a while ago, so I might be a little fuzzy on my remembrance, but I think the thinking was honestly kind of the same as you're saying, but around the fuzziness with zip codes. I know with Whatcom County, as you get out into the county a little more into East County, the zip codes get a lot bigger, but there might be different communities or, kind of capturing. Yeah, I guess we're trying to lean more into the small fuzziness than the big fuzziness, if that makes sense. If someone says they're in Laurel and Whatcom County, or we can pinpoint that to a zip code easier than we could if someone just says 98227 or whatever. So yeah, that's the thinking there. Petra, I see you got your hand up.
Hey Matt, yeah, I want to kind of react to the question because I remember we were talking about it a lot, and I think one of the reasons we picked a place instead of a zip code was really like because we're talking about community where this person belongs, which may be different where they live. And so I think that was one of the reasons we opted for, a city than a zip code, which may be confusing to people.
Yeah, thanks, Petra. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Hey, Joni.
A quick question. I think I read through some of the North Central report, and it looked like they actually had a financial incentive for people to complete the survey, entering into a raffle for $100 or something, which, is probably fairly minimal. But my observation in working with some community groups is that even just that small financial incentive is helpful in getting participation. So I don't know, we hadn't really talked about that in our community of practice, but I did notice that when I was looking at the North Central. So
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I think the way we've got the survey structured right now, if that were to be something that we were going to look at, we'd have to find a way to also preserve that anonymity from the responses, which I think is doable. But I would also, probably need to talk to Liz and some of the money folks over here at the ACH to figure out what all we could do around that. So probably more to come on that. I'll say if we're a month in and responses are certainly flagging and we're not kind of hitting the numbers we need to, we might look at some ways to kind of bump that up and raffle or something. We could probably factor into that. But yeah, I won't say it's off the table, but just would need a little bit of problem solving, which is not impossible. I think we're all probably used to being problem solvers here. So okay, anybody else?
Well, I'll just put in a plug that our Health Ministries Network did apply the survey to our faith community nurses. It was, rather homogenous, older, white group, which probably skewed some of the data from the pilot project, but that it wasn't nearly as intimidating as it sometimes seems to kind of sell this if you have trust in that community that you're working with. And I think that was called out on the chat box. It is that trust that really drives some of these, some of the survey responses. So.
Yeah, thanks, Joni. Appreciate that. Daniela, I saw your hand go up for just a quick second. I'm not sure if you had anything else you wanted to shout out or no.
Oh no, it was a mistake.
Okay. Um, well, we've got one more slide, but probably no need to really pull it up. I've got it on my other monitor here. But just as we talk about next steps, we'll stay connected with you all and with the full network as well, around updates and ongoing support that might be needed for this work. You can probably expect to hear from me again and uh, about the well-being survey at the partner convening that's coming up on the 22nd and 23rd. If you've not already registered for that, I would probably do that quick. Um, again, we've got the monthly well-being measurement community of practice the first Monday of every month. Um, and yeah, once this survey collection is complete, and again with an asterisk, first or second week of March, um, once we've kind of gone through the data and are able to report out that preliminary work, I think that's where phase two of that work is going to start, where we start to bring that back to community and start to facilitate some dialogues around what we're seeing um, from the well-being survey and where we can kind of start to direct our work moving forward. So that is all we have. But it's not. Laura, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess I do have one more question. In an earlier time, I remember you talking about dialogues accompanying the survey. And I guess at that time, I had the impression that it would be part of the survey administration process or the data collection. I think what I'm hearing you say now is that you're envisioning dialogues more as a way to share out and discuss the survey results. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
And the reason I'm asking is that I was really excited about the idea of little dialogues that would be part of actually administering the survey, because I think it connects to the trust thing when there's some conversation about it, as opposed to just a link or a piece of paper or a QR code.
Yeah, I see Stacy put down in the chat here both and. I think that's kind of in earlier days for this. I think that was the direction we were thinking about rolling. Uh, Pulled back on that a little bit, just again, kind of in that same frame as wanting to keep the survey collection lightweight. Is not wanting to put too much work on partners who might be helping to administer the survey to also, learn how to do a dialogue and all the logistics that might go into that. That being said, on the resource library, we do have, resources for, facilitating dialogue around well-being and belonging. I think it's 6 questions that the community of practice also helped develop to put together there, and a little bit of like a how-to and note-taker guide and all that. So if that is something that you think it's gonna, in kind of your networks help create that trust and help inform some of that work, I'd say go for it. And yeah, but we'll also, as the ACH and as a network, start to do some of that work as well later in 2025. So there'll be more of that coming from us as we move forward. But there's always time for a good dialogue, I think. So yeah, thank you.
Matt, with Joni still in the room, if I remember correctly, Joni, I think you may have done a little bit of a blend because you were in a group setting, if I remember right, and your story to tell here, but you used a couple of the questions as a little bit of the setting the stage and, the foundation for sort of why is this important? Why do we care? And allowing folks to kind of talk about what is well-being as, sort of as a precursor to taking the survey.
Right. Yeah. We talked a little bit about what does belonging mean to people. So, that seemed to be a big need to sort of ground people in that sense of what we meant by belonging and what other people perceived as belonging. Had some really wonderful dialogues around that, really, some very poignant, comments that were made. So, but again, that was kind of in a group setting at a retreat with everybody, pretty trusting of each other. So a little different scenario than just, launching a large survey. But I think I share Laura's concern about the dialogue and that we need to maintain consistency sort of in what we're saying, because most people say, what are you going to use this for? And so to be clear on what that actually means. And I think the communication tools maybe weren't quite as available back then as they are now. So you've done a really good job on that. But yeah, so just my comments on that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joni. And those those communication tools are I think we're getting put together and finalized kind of between when you were doing that work and now. So, but yeah, definitely that's why we wanted to do some of this early and why that pilot ended up being so important is to um, help kind of sand down some of those rough edges before we go super wide with this. So yeah, a lot of appreciation to you and everyone else who did that. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think with that, I'll go ahead and close this down here. Um, I think you all can expect a follow-up email from me either end of the day today or earlier tomorrow with some links to everything that we talked about here. If you have questions or need assistance, like I said, for the next 2 months, I'm here to be a resource to you as we do this work. Yeah, thank you so much.